There are office floors in mid-century Manhattan that don't exist anymore, not the way they were. The open rows of desks, the clatter of 40 typewriters moving in rough unison, the particular social ecosystem of women who worked with extraordinary skill in spaces that were almost professionally invisible, the Steno pool, and the rules that governed it, the real ones, the ones nobody put in the employee handbook, were as intricate and as carefully enforced as anything in the executive suites upstairs. By 1960, stenographers and secretaries represented one of the largest single occupational categories for women in the American workforce. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that there were approximately 1.7 million stenographers and typists employed in the United States by the early 1960s, and the overwhelming majority were women. In a Steno pool, which was the centralized clerical department used by most mid to large corporations, before personal secretaries became standard, dozens of these women might work in a single room, processing the correspondence, memos, and documents for an entire floor of executives who never learned their last names. The first unspoken rule was about speed and silence. A woman's typing speed was not just a technical credential, it was a statement about her work ethic, her reliability, and her professional identity. The standard benchmark was 60 words per minute for acceptable performance, 80 or above for the women who got the better assignments. But the rule nobody said out loud was this: you did not ask for help loudly, you did not make your difficulties visible, and you did not call attention to anyone else's performance in a way that could be read as competitive. The competition was real. The performance of collegiality was mandatory. The dress code was written down somewhere in an HR document that nobody had actually read, because it didn't need to be read. Skirts to the knee, not above, not significantly below. Heels, or at minimum professional flats, hair tidy, nails presentable but not theatrical. The reasoning given, when it was given at all, was professional appearance. The actual function was something more specific. Women in the Steno pool were visible to everyone who passed through, and their collective appearance was understood to reflect the professionalism of the company itself. They were, in a sense, the public face of the office, though nobody gave them that title. The relationship with dictating executives was navigated through a set of small, precise behaviors. You entered the room with your Steno pad. You did not sit until offered a chair. You wrote exactly what was said, including the hesitations and corrections, then transcribed only the final clean version. If an executive made a grammatical error in dictation, and they often did, you corrected it silently in the transcription. You did not mention it, ever. The fiction that the executive's language was already polished was one that everyone maintained, and it was maintained by the women doing the correcting. There was a hierarchy within the pool that the organizational chart did not acknowledge. Seniority mattered. The women who had been there longest knew which executives were reasonable, which were demanding, which ones had tempers that ran in predictable patterns, and which dictations required a particular kind of patience to survive. That knowledge was shared selectively. A new woman who had proven herself, who was discreet, competent, and socially intelligent, would receive it. Someone who seemed temporary or who talked too freely did not. Lunch was another social institution. The Steno pool often ate together, but the table arrangement was not random. Senior women sat with senior women. The social strata of the room traveled to the lunchroom intact. The conversations over sandwiches and cigarettes, and the smoking was nearly universal. A 1960 Gallup survey found that about 33% of American women smoked, and in urban office settings that number was considerably higher, were where real information moved. Who was about to be let go? Which supervisor was decent? Which department was expanding? The lunch table was an intelligence network, and it was remarkably effective. The question of credit was a constant subtext. Women in the Steno pool regularly improved documents, caught errors in contracts, suggested language that made a memo clearer and more effective. The unspoken rule was that none of this was acknowledged, and more importantly, you did not acknowledge it yourself. You did not say, I actually suggested that approach in any context where it could be heard. The work belonged to the name on the letterhead. This was known, accepted, and privately resented in proportions that varied enormously from woman to woman. What's striking now, looking back, is the sheer competence required to operate within that world. A skilled stenographer of the 1960s was managing dictation speeds of over 100 words per minute, transcribing from shorthand notation with near-perfect accuracy, proofreading for grammar, maintaining confidentiality on sensitive corporate information, and navigating a complex social environment, all simultaneously, all day, for a salary that in 1962 averaged about $75 per week. The Steno pool began its decline in the late 1960s and accelerated through the 1970s as IBM's Selectric typewriter, then dictation machines, then early word processors restructured how clerical work was organized. By 1985, the centralized Steno pool was largely a historical artifact. The women who had built their professional lives within it mostly moved into other office roles, or stepped back into domestic life, or simply aged out of the workforce. What they left behind, what vanished with them, was a form of professional intelligence that was deeply undervalued precisely because it was so completely depended upon. The office in 1960 ran on the Steno pool, it just never said so.